Dips, dives and demon drives. Donington shakes up the title fight. This is the Donington Park Grand Prix review.
Hello and welcome back to the British Touring Car Podcast. Russ has survived his big boat journey.
I have.
Although a little wavy today, aren't you?
I mean, it turns out that traversing the North Sea in a smallish boat isn't necessarily the greatest idea. But I had a good time. I've been to Bruges, I've been to Bremerhaven in Germany, and I've been to Amsterdam, hence the Ajax shirt.
So you did manage to see some of the racing though, thankfully.
I saw all three.
And you've watched all races back as well.
I've watched all races back. I watched races 1 and 2 on the deck, and I was able to have the commentary on, which is great because Tim Harvey said very much so a lot this weekend. So
he did. It wasn't just me that noticed that. Okay.
First time he said it, my girlfriend turned and went, "Oh, someone's been listening to the podcast." So there you go. And then the third race, I wasn't able to watch with sound because I was in a lounge at the time. However, as you say, I've diligently come back today, and the first thing I did before I'd even unpacked was to watch the 3 races, so I was ready to get this podcast done tonight. So a little bit later than usual. Thank you for being patient. It is difficult to do it remotely. It's even harder to do it when one is floating on a boat somewhere in the sea. It just gets a bit difficult to
At least
to
you
do.
were floating.
Yes.
General thoughts and feelings about the weekend then?
Yeah, I think people look back at Donington as possibly the moment the championship was potentially won and lost. I certainly think this weekend, drivers have had to really work against some luck this weekend. I will say, we'll get into a bit further later, but there is one driver that seems immune to the bad luck at the moment, and whether that will change in these last 2 rounds remains to be seen. Slightly disappointed we didn't get a proper wet race. I know that race 3 teased it for a little bit, and it was quite exciting, and I actually thought in that race that Aaron Taylor was going to win because the Vauxhall is fantastic in those mid conditions. But yeah, I thought it was a good weekend. I thought that we're getting into the part of the season now where the driving's not becoming a bit more desperate, but we're seeing a lot more action now. People are going for the moves.
I was just about to say, we saw more incidents with those drivers running towards the top this weekend, and I don't know whether that's just coincidence or whether that's because they're living life a little bit more on the edge and they know there's a lot more at stake, and they're going for these gaps that they may not have gone for earlier in the season. But yeah, it was a decent weekend of racing. As you say, it's changed the championship up a little bit, and we will take you through, of course, all 3 races.
Yeah, just a bit of housekeeping before we do. I've only had the chance to watch the races and the interviews afterwards with the 3 drivers, so I'm not as up to date this weekend as often, so you might have to carry me a little bit, Sam. I saw nothing of qualifying on the Saturday.
Yeah, so I had a great time watching qualifying while arm deep in my car, getting it all fixed and sorted.
I'm not even going to make the joke.
No, good. So yeah, we'll get straight on to qualifying now, and Saturday was interesting. There were rain showers about. There was a little bit of dampness to the track for the first session that went out, so much so that drivers went out on the wet tyre to see what the conditions were like. By the end of the session, most of the drivers came back in, had put the dry tyre on, and were actually going a lot quicker. So a couple of big names that went out early on. Moffat, Keenly. He never likes to do more than 1 session on a Saturday.
Saving on parts. You watch, he's going to win all the races now because he's got all the tyres left for the season.
Rowbottom went out early, who had set the earlier pace in FP1 and FP2 in those wet conditions.
I'm not sure there's a more frustrating driver on the grid than Robot. And we'll get into that during the racing, but I genuinely think he's the most frustrating driver on the grid. Yeah, but we'll get on to that.
All 3 Cupras went out as we kind of probably expected. We'd normally have to have a little bit of luck to get one of those drivers through, and also Andrew Watson was the other key name. Dan Zelos making his debut in the championship. Kind of expected him to go out early on in those changeable conditions, and he did, but his Sunday really did make up for it.
Yeah, I have to say, I saw the times, and I was slightly worried for his weekend when I saw how far off it he was in this qualifying session. Obviously, I wasn't watching it live, so I didn't get to see the benefit of seeing the change in track conditions. But when I saw how far off it he was, I thought, oh dear, this is a heck of a jump. But as we'll get to on the Sunday, those fears are well and truly allayed as the weekend went on.
Yeah, so into qualifying 2 then, 12 drivers competing in this, and some key names that went out in this session were Jake Hill and Dan Camish. in 7th and 9th respectively.
Probably worth pointing out now that Jake Hill was battling food poisoning this weekend.
Yes.
I presume it was the case for the Saturday as well, was it?
Yeah.
It wasn't just
Yeah.
the Sunday? No, okay.
No, he was feeling quite unwell this weekend, struggling to keep any sort of like food down. And
he looked on the interviews on Sunday.
He did,
looked
didn't he?
an empty man. Yeah, he looked like a man that spent most of the night on the toilet. Yeah.
Morgan out in this session in 8th. He was your tip for pole.
He was, yeah, disappointing.
Keenly, he was on the mediums all weekend. He didn't run a soft tyre during qualifying, which is a really strange decision.
I guess in some ways, obviously this weekend it was only medium tyres for the race day,
Yes,
unless
yeah.
of course there was rain. Maybe he felt that he could maybe get a bit of scrubbing done for the day, or get a bit of a jump on the rest of the field. I will say, once it became obvious that he wasn't going to set time to go through, I'm stunned that he put, particularly because he doesn't need the warm-up laps in the same way as the front-wheel drive cars do. I'm stunned he didn't come into the pits and bolt on a pair of soft tyres to get through. Or equally, I suppose, do BMW want him in the top 6? They want Hill and Turkington there, presumably, because they're in the title fight. Adam Morgan is not.
Yeah, that's true. But going through to the top 6 shootout then was Aaron Taylor-Smith, Tom Ingram, Sutton, Dobble, Turkington and Cook. Both Astras through.
Yeah, I mean,
they love Donington as well, don't they?
I put a post out on the social media after this session, but if he was on poll. But I think that you've got to give Adam Weaver and everyone at PMR incredible credit for what they're doing on that team, because they are more competitive on the Saturday. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
They're quicker in qualifying trim than they are necessarily the race trim.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've had 2 cars get through here at this stage of the season I think is really, really pretty impressive. And I don't know, part of me thinks that I just want to see him bring a new car to the grid. If that takes to the next level. On the other hand, they're doing really well with this car.
They are doing so well with this car, and since that mid-season break and that little tweak on the boost from the Toka engine, we have seen a little bit of an improvement from their race results as well as qualifying results.
Yeah, and this was brought up on our socials over the weekend. Yeah. It's also worth pointing out that boost has been the same for the Cupras, who are nowhere near the PMR. So it's not just the case that they've had the boost turned up, and that boost is only turned up to try and match the engines that are built by the manufacturers. So it's not a case of we feel sorry for you can have a stronger engine. It's to try and make it so no car has a massive engine imbalance in the field. And as I say, the Coopers have also had that boost and aren't able to produce the same sort of results. So let's just bear that in mind.
Yeah. But it was Josh Cook who took pole position by 71 thousandths of a second.
Thank you, Josh.
From Colin Turkington. Just narrowly missing out on his 3rd pole position in a row, that would have been as well, I think. With Mikey Doble in 3rd, Ash Sutton in a competitive 4th, because it seemed like he was struggling a little bit with the car. From Ingram in 5th, and then Taylor Smith in 6th.
Right, let's get on to race number 1 on the Sunday. Obviously, all cars were on medium tyre, as we said. Turkington was able to get into the lead really easily off the line, which brings us to my first talking point, is the rear-wheel drive. And we've had this every year.
I knew you were going to mention this.
Each year Toka look at it, because sometimes they have that the boost on off the start turned down to try and compensate for it.
Yep.
I have to say, I thought this was just too easy, personally. The launch off the line for the rear-wheel drive BMW is so... I think it's so much stronger than anything, and too strong. Now, you could balance that out by saying that they need a lap or 2 to get the stuff up to temperature.
Yeah, front wheels.
However, equally, I can't remember the last time we saw a BMW get into the lead in race 1, or any race actually, and then struggle by the end of the lap by having that second phase of attack by the front-wheel drive car behind.
I think the fact that when there's a BMW in the mid-pack, we never really see them make up more than 2 positions off the start.
Hill's got quite a good record of going 3 or 4 off the start.
I wouldn't say so much this season. It's always going to be more obvious when it's a front row start, front wheel drive against rear wheel drive, and you normally get them make up that, I think, 8 metre distance that is the difference between first and second.
The thing is, though, in race 2, Sutton had to effectively... what's the word I'm looking for? Not abort, but he couldn't attack Collins turn 1 because he had to make sure his first priority was make sure Hill didn't get the launch on him to P2.
Yeah.
Now that takes away from some of the overall racing, because Sutton is having to defend right. You shouldn't have to defend off the start line, is my view. It should be down to who gets the best launch, who's got the best reactions, rather than having this rear-wheel drive
Maybe it is
boost.
also down to that as well.
Yeah, there is that, and you can argue that actually Sutton combated that quite well in race 2 because he did get off the line well and did cut Hill off and was able to get past Turkington, albeit Turkington made a mistake, as we'll get to.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing is that whenever you bring it up, any person with a BMW hat or a BMW sort of dog in the fight says that it's the greatest. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fair. There's no problem. Anybody else goes, it's a problem.
I think.
What I will say, just before I finish on this, is that when Sutton was in a rear-wheel drive car, there's a lot more people crying and whinging about it than when it's Turkington or Hill. But there we go.
I think it is at the moment fairly well balanced, and that's only because of seeing how the wins are spread throughout the teams throughout the season. And if you look at those front couple of rows, normally where you expect the winners to come from, if there is a BMW in there, they're not winning all of those races.
Well, most of them though.
I wouldn't say most. I think it's a fair split between front wheel drive and rear wheel drive.
I think they've won more. I think rear wheel drive won more races.
We'll find out at the end of the season, won't we?
Yes, we will. The first real part of action in the race is Ingram versus Dobble. They had a nice bit of a battle throughout the rear part of the circuit. Ingram was using his hybrid in some really weird and inventive places this year to try and get past people. I really felt for Ingram here because he got the move done on Dobble. Dobble was too late on the brakes into the final hairpin, go back onto the pit straight and biffed Ingram round, basically.
I couldn't decide whether he was avidly trying to defend from his teammate, Taylor Smith, or whether he was looking for the move on Ingram to get him back quickly, because he completely misjudged it either way.
I think he just missed the breaking point. I don't think it was either attack or a defence. I just think he got it wrong. I think he got the breaking point wrong. Whether, again, you say distracted maybe from a bit of defending or trying to attack, but I just think he missed his breaking point.
Yeah, and, that put Ingram down to 12th, and then the fight back was on, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and that was sort of Ingram's weekend in a nutshell, really. He didn't do anything wrong, in my opinion, in this race, or the next race, which we'll get to. As you say, put him back down into 12th. Cook then had a really big slide at the hairpin.
Didn't he just?
We know Cook likes a loose car, however, this weekend it was incredibly loose.
Yeah, that rear end just, I don't know whether it's unsettled or just stepped out on him. But he had to bury the throttle to try and straighten it back up. Yeah,
this was certainly a very easy pass into second, which is where he was able to stay for the majority of the race.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get the soapbox out. Watson had a massive off. Unclear if he'd done it on his own or if it was contact. The replays weren't particularly conclusive.
They weren't.
What is conclusive is that he smacked the tyre stacks, which have been bolted to the floor for reasons that I couldn't work out.
They weren't bolted to the floor for long once he contacted them.
For very long. No, obviously ripped them out the floor. Was quite lucky the car didn't go over on him, I think. Yeah. He got a heck of a launch.
Yeah, some of the stills and the pictures that have been taken of that incident over the weekend, go and find them on social media because there are plenty out there. And just have a look at how much energy there is in that photo. The fact that the size of the tyre stacks that have to be picked up by big manitous to put them in the right places is launched into the air along with the car, and also the pictures of the broken hub and drive shaft link that there is of Watson's car shows you how much of an impact that there was and what damage it caused.
I really think it's time we get rid of these bits of furniture because, particularly in this sort of corner, and I've got 2 points to make. The gravel was enough of a deterrent. We saw enough drivers who had to take to the gravel this weekend. It slowed them down enough that they're not going to keep the track limits. They dip a wheel on the gravel, they either lose the car or it slows them down. And actually, this links to my second point. In the F1, we saw that in Austria this year. They put a new gravel strip in.
Just a small one, just that sort of wide.
But there was enough to stop cars running wide because the penalty is that you lose momentum, you lose time. Now that is better because you're not going to damage the car. All you're going to do is lose time, which is what we should lose because you shouldn't be exceeding the limits of the circuit. Get that, and I get you've got to have some level of track limits. Otherwise, you're going to have drivers straight lining as much as they can. They're going to try and find every margin they can, and I kind of agree that with some people that the track limits does ruin racing to a degree. On the other hand, if the ball goes over the line in football, rugby, then it's gone over the line. There's no ifs and buts. my football team.
It's a defined parameter.
Yeah, my football team lost one game in a season, and that was away at Man City, where the ball didn't cross the line by, I think it was 11 millimetres, something stupid. But
he's not bitter about it.
But it didn't cross the line. I can't be bitter about it because it didn't cross the line. I can't be bitter about it because it's a matter of fact. So I get that.
For me...
But this is ridiculous.
For me, the really easy thing is, being an MSB track, you just put the pressure pads, the half the width of the car, inside on that curb, and if they touch it, done. Yeah,
you put the pressure pads and the gravel works well.
Yeah, the gravel is absolutely fine.
There's no risk of that. The only risk is you drag a little bit onto the circuit. Fine, but there's better than balls, and particularly in a series where we've got open cockpit cars, albeit Halo makes it slightly more closed now. But to have those sort of hazards and an open cockpit is crazy.
They did remove them for the F4s.
Yeah, but
I get what you're saying. They're still massive pieces on a circuit that can cause immense amount of damage. You can see that by the damage that's been done to Watson's car, which was then compounded by the fact that it was dragged through the gravel. I'm amazed.
They showed more respect to putting the tyre barrier back than they did to Watson's car.
I'm amazed there wasn't a full lift for that.
Yeah, and there was no reason not to give it a full lift.
No, there was plenty of time. You could have had the
Man 2 long lap.
Man 2 putting the tyres back while there was a full lift.
Well, here's an idea. Don't put the tyres back. Just pull them off. Pull them through the gravel to the side and lift Watson's car properly. If I was Toyota, I would be absolutely fuming with how they dealt with that situation.
I know where I'd send the bill.
Well, absolutely.
Depending, obviously, what instigated that, we still haven't seen replays of.
I think you send the bill to regardless, because the punishment that Watson gets there, even if it's a mistake or contact, the punishment he gets does not fit the crime.
Yeah.
That car could have been a write-off. And in a series where it's getting harder and harder to attract manufacturers, it's getting harder and harder for people to compete, you can't be affording to have cars written off. Okay, it wasn't written off, it was got back out, but that was a heavy impact. A lot of work had to be done to fix that car. And it could have been so much worse as well. And this is the other thing. What's it actually going to take to move these away? Are we going to have a really serious incident?
The only thing that I don't know how to solve yet, but the fact of the angle that he was coming out that corner, he was right broadside across there.
Yeah.
One worry I do have about gravel traps is when a car is going sideways in and it digs and then it rolls. That is the only worry that I have about those.
I agree, however...
in an incident like that where it was going sideways.
However, we see cars going to the gravel sideways a lot and they don't always dig and roll.
I know. It all depends on momentum.
And how deep the gravel is.
Yeah.
That can be managed, I think. Anyway, soapbox away. Rowbottom had a good first... no, he didn't. This is wrong notes. Rowbottom was then off into the gravel with damage. This is probably, I think he went through some of the stones that had been dragged onto the track. And he gave himself a puncture, which looked like he was carrying a small bomb on board, because the way it blew was incredible.
Yes, he had already made up 8 positions on lap 1, and he was flying at that point. And I thought it was a little bit of retribution for what had happened on Saturday with qualifying.
And it went to help me in my fantasy Btcc.
Yes, exactly. Until he hit the brakes,
yes, he did,
going up to Redgate, and just went straight on.
Yep, big blowout. And the safety car was then called, probably, as I say, A, to recover Watson, B, to take away some debris, and C, to make sure the tyres were put back nice.
Yeah.
Ingram was recovering well and made 2 places off the restart lap. And Aaron Taylor-Smith was next up to lose it on his own. He was very lucky to avoid the tyres going through the final chicane. He came in at a very strange angle. That
was mainly because of the gravel that was still left on the circuit.
Which, again, if I'm trying to get too angry with the recovery team, why don't they sweep that? Look, nobody wants to lose laps behind the safety car. However, Donington's a long lap behind the safety car. You've got time to be doing these things. We didn't actually lose. I think we only lost 3 laps overall to recover a car and put back the tyre stacks. You could have had somebody sweeping the circuit. I don't understand that, and I'd argue leaving gravel on the trap is more dangerous than...
Ingram certainly thinks so.
Yeah. Anyway. We then saw a nice bit of racing between Ingram and Morgan. I have to say the Hyundai is so good on the brakes. All of Ingram's moves were done under braking.
He really enjoyed... There were 2 places that he really enjoyed.
Yep.
He enjoyed going up into McLean's and just flicking out last moment and down into the hairpin.
Yeah.
Which I did say in the preview, it adds a little bit to the circuit.
He seems to be the only driver that realised that was an overtaking point this weekend.
Yeah.
I have to say, he was the one that was making the most of that extra loop. Absolutely. After that, effing kind of really settled after the safety car, and I found that race 1 dragged on for a bit after that.
Really?
Yeah, nothing really happened until lap 12 when Cook lost it into the chicane, clipping the tyre stack.
Yep.
Which allows Hill through easily. Hill's quite lucky that the car doesn't snap back on Cook because it's very, very, very fine margins of him getting through unscathed.
Yep.
But he did get through unscathed, which meant that he was up into the podium paying positions. Ahead, Sutton applied a little bit of pressure after the safety car laps. Gave a couple of laps where he really filled Collins' mirrors.
Really got close to him, and then the gap went back out again, which was quite strange. I'm assuming it was down to hybrid use.
Well, I think Sutton would have kept some of his tyres for the end. Turton was also battling an axle issue and then started banging in what he would describe as qualifying laps towards the end to get the gap back open. I also think Sutton was happy not taking any necessary risk. He was outscoring everybody, and he's not going to do it. Collins difficult to pass at the best of times. An obvious opportunity didn't open itself up. I think after a couple of laps, cool the tyres, cool the brakes, take the second, go again in race 2. Some good racing between Morgan and Huff, World Touring Car driver and champion Huff. And Morgan won out actually this week. Yeah, he did a nice couple of
Huff
moves.
lost a couple of places in this as well, and it looked like he had some sort of small issue. But I have also noticed that towards the end of races this year, Huff has lost a couple of positions.
Yeah, he has.
I'm wondering whether he's just using the tyres up a little bit too much early on, because he had decent pace early on.
Yeah, and also he's done that on purpose before to avoid being in the top 10, so he's
Yeah.
not had to make the obligatory tyre choice. I will say actually Morgan raced really well this weekend. I was quite impressed with him. Did some nice moves this weekend and looked really at home in the car for perhaps the first time this season where I think he's had a real confidence in the car. And then the race, I rather fizzled out from there. Turkington won and then gave the longest interview to Louise ever.
I thought you loved hearing from him.
I love the fact you get interviews of drivers straight after the races, but sometimes it's like, oh, good win for you out there. Yeah, it's a good win. Thanks, Steve. It's like, okay, brilliant. Here, we've got the life and times of the race, lap by lap. It was very strange. But yeah, that's it in race 1. Colin Turkington won from Ash Sutton in 2nd, Jake Hill 3rd, Josh Cook in 4th, Ingram recovering to 5th, Morgan 6th, Huff 7th, Camish 8th. For me, that was the championship's done for Camish, but this weekend is the final nail in the coffin. Yeah. Aaron Taylor-Smith in 9th, Osborne into the top 10, good result for him. Moffat 11th, which is a decent recovery from Saturday's disappointment. Dan Zelos points on debut, who had a very quiet race, but that's not a bad thing in the circumstances.
Although he got wrongly called out at the start by Tim Harvey for apparently stalling when it was actually Chilton who stalled on the grid.
Yep. Chris Smiley 13th, Dan Rowbottom 14th, and Dobble, who was an able to recover as well as Ingram, and he finished in 15th.
Yeah. Shall we get straight into race 2 then, mate?
Absolutely.
So race 2 was there were sprinklings of rain about.
There was, but not as much as Halstead thought there was.
Halstead was the only driver to go onto the formation lap on the wet tyre and quickly noticed his mistake by coming in at the end of it.
I will just give him a little bit of a bearing out here. Turkington afterwards said that it was a lot drier on the formation lap than it was a lap to the grid, because Turkington did say in his interview afterwards that he was very worried because at the start when he came to the grid it looked like the conditions that the BMW would really struggle in, i.e. greasy. Wet to dry, cold, and he did say that the difference between the 2 laps was marked. So I can understand. And to be fair to Halstead, I'd rather see him take the risk. What's he got to lose?
Yeah, so, he's got nothing to lose at the back. Watson was on the grid for race 2. Team Toyota managed to get that car all fixed up and back and ready. As I said, Halstead came in at the end of the formation lap, 4 slicks, realising his mistake, and then was out once they'd all started.
I think mistake's too harsh. I think gamble didn't pay off.
Yeah,
it's more correct.
Possibly.
I don't blame him for having a go.
And as the race got underway, it was a little bit eventful at the first corner, with Cook, Morgan and Camish all coming together at Redgate.
Yeah.
Camish lost out big time.
He did, yeah. Just a racing incident for me.
Yeah, it was 3 into 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just pushed out onto the grass and kind of had nowhere else to go.
Prior to that, I just want to pick up again that Sutton made a fantastic start to come across and block off Hill going into turn 1. And he was also to give Colin a little look, albeit not enough to launch a proper attack, but a good start from Sutton to negate the BMW rocket starts.
And that good start went on to mean that he would pass Turkington up at McLean's, following a little bit of a run wide from Turkington through the old hairpin. Tyres not quite warm enough.
Tyres, brakes, possibly a recurrence of the rear axle.
Yeah.
Also, not great conditions for the BMW at the start of the race either.
Ingram managed to get past Hill early on as well,
move.
which was kind of a standard Ingram move for this weekend. And Rowbottom again, up 5 positions on the first lap. These are drivers that we kind of think he should be passing in these early laps.
Still got to get past.
You have still got to get past and do it without getting into trouble.
Absolutely. Moffat was into the pit on lap 4 with
was.
issues. His season has been like that, hasn't it?
Not quite sure what the issues were. They had the rear wheel off and they were looking around at the back end.
And they killed the car straight away.
Yeah, and they turned it off. It's probably been a season to forget.
It's been a difficult move for Moffat into the team.
He's certainly struggled more than the other drivers.
Well, more than Kirk. I wouldn't say it's necessarily struggled more than Watson.
No, true.
He's taking a race win this year.
Yeah.
Watson's not had a podium yet.
No.
But no,
hard to believe, really.
Yeah, I'd say it's not been a kind year to Moffat for all sorts of reasons, and a lot of it, in my view, has been out of his control. I know that we've had your comments about him in the past, but I don't think he's done an awful lot wrong himself this year. Qualifying aside, he should be better in qualifying. I agree on that. However, actually in the races, he's had probably some of the hardest luck of anyone on the grid this year.
Yeah. Ingram then got an excellent run through the S's, couple of laps in to pass Turkington down into the hairpin.
Yeah.
Absolute banzai move and lasted the late breakers, so much so that the car was squirreling under the brakes.
Did he get a touch from Turkington, we think?
I don't think so.
Because the way it steps out at an angle
weird,
makes me think he has got a touch, but equally he wouldn't have got a touch that side from Turkington.
No.
I don't know.
He nudged into the back of Sutton.
Yes. If only we had on boards from every single car, we could figure these things out.
They're built strong, and we don't think that, or he doesn't think either, that is what caused his issue later on in the race.
No, although both Jake Hill and Paul O'Neill felt the fluid was coming out of the car. Now, whether that was at this point from Jake Hill's point of view, that was later in the race when the problem occurred. O'Neill thought it happened, he saw it in the contact, but equally he could have done it and nudged some water out the system, or
it could have been a case of as he came past Turkington, a stone got flicked up. But we don't know.
I'd be surprised because later on people would go through the gravel and drag it onto the track, which makes me think that would be when it would have happened. But
there seemed to be a massive battle pack in the midfield as well.
Yeah,
this week.
This was a great race for if you were in that
7 cars I counted were involved for 11th.
Yeah.
Which, although we were having good racing out front, it's always good to see these drivers in the mid-pack chopping and changing positions because they're going for every possible point.
Yeah, I mean, I've got here your Smiley, Chilton, Zelos, Osborne, all involved, all racing well together. It was
and every single lap, the order of them was changing as well.
Yeah, it was good to see.
De Leon was in there as well. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be in there for too long, though, because he did get a meatball flag to pull in and have some damage sorted.
Didn't see what the damage was.
Didn't either.
I was very surprised how the meatball flag operated this weekend because I thought in race 3 Morgan was a dead cert to get it because there's a lot of bodywork flapping under his front wheel. Chilton got away in race 2 or 3 where he had the gaff tape and it blew off as soon as he got out of the pit lane. It was race 3 because he came in for the wets. And Dan Rowbottom, to be fair, he came into the pits, but he didn't get black and orange flagged at the time either, albeit he came to the pits pretty sharpish.
Yeah.
But there was quite a little bit of loose bodywork on some of the cars this weekend, and I didn't really see why De Leon. I didn't see damage, but I'm surprised he got called in.
I haven't seen any of the damage either. No. Unfortunately, it seems to be his luck at the moment. It's either a penalty for something or getting pulled into the pits to get the car sorted out. I have to say, in this race, the top 5 cars just escaped.
Yeah, just went, didn't they?
At the front. And they seem to be in a class of their own. I don't know whether they didn't quite have the speed for the rest of them, but there was those 5, then the little pack, and then everyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sutton suddenly built a huge gap as well.
Yeah, so by that sort of 7, Ingram had put the pressure on Sutton really, really hard. Sutton defended, I think, exceptionally well, put the car in the right place. Yeah. I think he was deliberately trying to back Tom into Collins, try and take some pressure from himself. Yeah. I think so, because those who are kind of, when I say gaps, Colin, it wasn't a long distance, but they were just pulling away gradually lap on lap, and I think Sutton was deliberately trying to back Tom back into Colin.
It's a risky move considering how quick the Hyundai is in a straight line.
But I think that's even more reason why he did it, because I think Sutton knows that he's not got the car to compete with Ingram this year. On pure pace, on pure brakes and that kind of stuff, obviously with Ingram having more hybrid as well, I think Sutton knew he couldn't probably, for another 7 laps of the race, keep Ingram behind him, albeit Sutton wasn't to know what was coming.
Yeah, so this was on lap 10. Turkington managed to get past Ingram, and we saw Ingram suddenly drop back a long way.
Well, he's fallen off Sutton hugely at this point, hasn't he? Sutton,
probably a 3-second gap to Sutton.
Yeah.
Turkington comes past him. He then drops back to Hill, who was another 1.5 seconds behind, I think. Hill comes past him quite easily. And we realise there is an issue with the car. There's no power there. Even going up the hill towards McLean's, he's really struggling in a straight line. And this is at the point that Paul O'Neill had realised that there was fluid coming out, and he leaps it home to the pit lane, luckily enough, straight into the garage, and the team get to work almost instantly, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of how professional they are. They've got a whole front end built and in the truck ready to go. It doesn't make an easy job to change, but it's helpful that it's all there ready, doesn't it?
This was under the assumption that I'd assume that they've seen the temperatures going through the roof on the car. They know there's something of an issue with the cooling system. It was later found out that a stone had gone through the radiator. Which is
so unlucky.
It is.
It's just
really unlucky.
At this stage of the season where effing counts as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say it's written in the stars for a certain driver to win it, but that's just... You can't legislate for that in any way, shape or form.
No, you can't. The amount of gravel and stones that get brought onto a track each weekend.
Yeah.
And how many times do we see this in a season?
Oh.
Once, maybe twice. Yeah. And for it to be a title challenger as well is just even more unlucky. But yeah, the team got straight to work, pulling the car apart before the race had even finished. They were just on it. They knew what they had to do. They knew they had to get that front end swapped over. But yeah, it would then go on to be a fairly sedate into the race.
It was, although Morgan made a fantastic, great pass on Hill, side by side down the Craners, which, as I say, Morgan was really on this weekend, and Huff, a previous World Touring Car champion and race winner, race with Colin Turkington, World Touring Cars. Morgan, really good move by him, and it was good to see him being a lot more racy this weekend.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to point out as well for Road Bottom, into the top 6 from where he started, a really good recovery drive there.
It was. But Sutton took the win from Turkington and then Hill.
Cook was 4th.
Yeah.
Morgan 5th. Then Road Bottom, as I say, 7th Huff. Aaron Smith 8th. Dobble 9th. Osborne 10th, which is if he stayed all weekend. Camish 11th. which is good for Osborne to score. I know Camish had to recover, but even so. Chilton 12th. Dan Zelos scoring points again in 13th position. Watson 14th and Chris Smiley in 15th. Number 11 was pulled, which meant that Dan Camish was on pole. And I love the Steve Ryder joke about having the table shorter this week because they were worried about me Hill again. Steve, that's why we love you.
Dare I say, it was unnecessarily short as well.
Yeah,
I'm
really
pretty sure Sutton could have gone, I'll have that ball out of there, rather than having it up nice and high where he can't actually see into it.
Although, he ruined any chance of conspiracy because he pulled 11, which wasn't ideal for him. Right, should we move on to race number 3 then?
Yes, definitely.
Before the race, I was going to say a great effort by Hyundai, who got that full front engine change done before the race.
Within an hour. That's, ridiculous.
I'm not having a go here. I've seen you work on cars.
Yeah.
And I've seen how long it took us to change my front bearing the other day.
Yes.
And the thought of being able to do that big a job in an hour is crazy.
There are, I reckon, probably about 10 or 12 people that were probably pulled onto that car.
But
there would have been mechanics pulled on from Chilton's car, from Osborne's, and so on.
But
to do that within an hour is really impressive.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
24-hour 2CV race was also on this weekend at Snetterton. They have tiny little engines. There's about 5 bolts that hold those in and 3 different connections. They change those in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
To do a whole full setup of a front end of a touring car in under an hour.
Which includes brakes, suspensions,
mental.
All the sensors, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's fantastic effort by Bristol Street Motors. Fair play. The race itself, nothing really exciting off the start, except that towards the end of that, Chilton and Sutton had an off damage to Sutton. It looked like the rear toe link had broken. I'm not sure who we got the contact from. It was either Chilton or it could have been one of his Napa teammates. I think it was his Napa teammate.
I think it might have been.
I think it was.
Might have been.
Because Chilton went off with him, and I don't think he would have done Chilton would go off with him. Yeah. It looked to me as if, I'm not sure if it was Osborne, Camish or Rowbottom. It was difficult to really tell.
I think it would have been Rowbottom. Because obviously Camish and Osborne were on the front row.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, Rowbottom was the only other driver down there, but I do think Chilton was involved in some way.
Yeah, I think they were all together.
I don't know whether it was a really like small innocuous touch that has broken something, like...
Or the chip through the gravel, which is a good deterrent for not running wide. Albeit Sutton didn't have much control about running wide on this one, but brings back to the earlier point.
Also, we saw last year, Dan Lloyd just had a toe link break.
Yeah, it happens.
It does happen.
But again, pretty unlucky for Sutton, given that I don't think he did an awful lot wrong in this move either. And that's him out of the race.
Yep. Out of the race, yes, sort of.
Well,
they got it
out of any chance of scoring points.
To try and get him back in, to try and get the fastest lap, which he unfortunately didn't get anyway.
Yeah. By all intents and purposes, out of the race.
And Ingram from the back, headlights ablaze from lap 1.
Up to 14th.
On flash and everything.
Yeah, up to 14th into lap 1.
Was rapid.
Yeah. It's because he had an engine change. Yeah, we'll get...
And all the hybrid.
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end, so how... Yeah. 5-second penalty was handed out for Cooper, but not De Leon.
No.
It was Smiley this time, who was out of position at the start. As we say, most drivers will get that through their career. It happens. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's a matter of fact. De Leon, this is really quite impressive to where De Leon would finish. He was into the pits at the end of that.
I've only just realised that.
With an issue.
From where he then finished.
Yeah.
I know.
We'll get back to that later, but De Leon had to pit with an issue. Was it potentially a puncture maybe? I don't know, because he was able to get back out. So
he was able to come straight back out.
We then saw Turkington get spun around at the Melbourne hairpin. He was hit by Huff. However, for me, it was a case of 3 into 1 doesn't go, and it was again a bit of door bashing, and in the end, Turkington just got the brunt of it. Morgan was involved there too.
I think it was Rowbottom into... Was it Rowbottom into Huff?
Having a busy race, Rowbottom.
Yeah, Rowbottom into Huff, then into Turkington. It was a concertina effect. I think.
Right, because actually, looking at penalties, which I'll get to at the end of the race, but I'll mention it here as it makes sense. Rowbottom received an official reprimand and 2 penalty points for causing a collision, an incident with...
His loyalty card must be full by now.
Well, actually, there's a driver who's had a bigger loyalty card, which I'll get to at the end of this. At the end of this, but yeah, you're right. It was Rowbottom into... I think that's slightly harsh on Rowbottom, personally. To me, it looked a bit like a racing incident of... There's several cars into one corner. I think getting 2 penalty points is a bit much.
It had a significant effect.
Shouldn't matter. It doesn't. I know. It doesn't matter.
I know, but we also don't know what the telemetry has said for where his braking was.
Yeah. I agree with all that. But equally, do you want to see cars overtake or not? It's the first couple of laps.
Yeah.
I don't think it's penalty point unless he's literally decided not to brake and just arrow into them. But that didn't. Obviously, he wasn't going fast enough for that. So anyway. Trying to understand the consistency of decision making is very, very difficult indeed. By lap 3, Osborne has started to tumble. I must admit, at the end of lap 2, I thought, "Ooh, Osborne's doing right here. Maybe he get a podium." That didn't happen. Although to be fair to him, he was roughed up a little bit coming out of the final corner, and that
got shuffled out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ingram was making move after move, particularly through McLean, as you said earlier, which just insanely good.
It just seemed to be every lap. It was either up into McLean's, down into the hairpin, up into McLean's, down. He was taking 2 drivers a lap at some point.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that, of course, a brand new engine will have more power. Yeah. Of course it will. However, and having the full hybrid helps as well. However, you've still got to pick your way through the pack. You've still got to get through without making any contact or...
And the fact to have the confidence that everything is back on the car with the right setup, in the right way, for you to go out and attack like that.
And to control your emotions throughout the race as well, because we saw at the end that...
Although an angry Ingram is a fast Ingram, we know that already.
However, you've still got to, as you say, you've got to temper that, and you've got to make sure you don't lose anything by having that approach. He was absolutely fantastic to watch. Anybody who wants to do it down by saying it was a new engine, just leave the sport, because you don't understand why it's so good.
He was on the tail of Hill by lap 3. He was up with his championship rivals so early in the race, we thought, hang on a minute, something good is going to happen here.
Absolutely. Here's a point I want to talk about, actually.
Cool.
Dom and Aaron Taylor Smith are fighting hard again on lap 5. Is this good to see, or do the team need to step in? Now, you could argue that nothing went wrong here.
I was going to say, this week, I think they've learned from what's happened previously. They were able to give each other racing room. Yes, a little bit of rubbing at times.
But they're also second and third at this point. Do you run a risk? You've got Aaron Taylor-Smith at that point leading the independents. Now, I know Double is eligible for independence as well before people come at that, but you've got Double leading the Jack Series, which is what his main aim is going to be, and you've got Aaron Taylor-Smith leading the independents, what his aim is going to be.
Yeah.
So do you just say, actually, just hold stern on where you are here. You're both winning your classes where you need to be. Because all they did was let Camish escape by fighting, and Camish was able to just put their foot down and go. And I think that they had a real chance, because Camish hasn't been quick in that car this year.
No.
And he wasn't quick in this race, relatively speaking. He wasn't setting the fastest laps.
No.
I think they could have stuck with him had they worked a bit more cleverly together. I know a chance to win a race of PMI doesn't come around as often as it does for other teams.
No.
I'm not saying they threw this away, because I don't think it was a dead cert they did win the race. However, I'm not sure if this is good to see or not, this level of team fighting. I don't know. I'm interested for your view.
I think the lead that they have in the Independence Trophy, whether that's for the teams or for the drivers' side of the Independence, doesn't really matter. I think Taylor-Smith is going to clearly win the Independence drivers. PMR are going to clearly win the team's title. Dobble has got such a lead now. Pearson has dropped out in the Jack Sears. You can kind of just let them race. Let them have that building of skills and stuff like that, especially for Dobble, who has only been in the season for this year and last. I think it's a good thing, as long as we don't get the contact which has happened earlier in the season.
I think I'd agree if they're fighting over 6th, 7th, 8th, but when they're both in the podium positions, I just think you've got, I don't know, I think you're risking so much by fighting, and all you're doing is letting everyone else catch up behind, whilst letting the leader go. And so early in the race, well, if that had been the last lap or so, I'd say, yeah, fair enough. I completely understand that. It's the last lap of the race. Go for it. Well, last couple of laps, race now. But I think, personally, and we see it in F1, that generally you'll hold station for most of that, unless one of you is ridiculously quicker than the other one and thinks they can go after the leader. But otherwise, hold position and then, sure, the last few laps, go for it. But I think we're going to... I don't think we're far off a, quote, disaster because they get very, very close.
We'll see. We'll see how it pans out for the rest of the season.
Lap 6, safety car was called for debris, which is a peculiar reason to call a safety car, but debris was down.
It was Smiley that caused the debris.
It was.
And he came into the pits for that. It looks like it was possible tyre, or he clipped a tyre bundle. But it looked like it was coming out of the S's. There was absolutely rubbish everywhere.
Yeah. So we had a 1-lap safety car to clear that. On the restart, I got quite excited because spots of rain were starting to fall. And it wasn't just a little bit of drizzle, it was looking very, very wet indeed. We then saw, I would not want to be the team bosses here, Watson decided that Moffat wasn't worth keeping on the track and punting him into oblivion at the chicane. That was... clumsy, I think I'll use the word.
Clumsy.
I'll use the word clumsy for Watson. Moffat out. And again, I do feel for Moffat because I don't think he's had anything wrong here either. You can't legislate for getting biffed off by your teammate.
No, you can't.
I would not want to be in the Toyota trucks after that. You'd be livid, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's...
It's not a good look.
A little bit reckless, a little bit of... I don't know, mindlessness, really.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessary. Safety car came back out because Moffat was
completely stuck,
completely beached in that gravel. But yeah, it's a weird one. Watson has not had a good weekend.
No, what was also weird is that obviously the safety car, when it's scrambled, it shows on all the screens of the drivers in their car. Hill obviously wasn't paying attention to his because he passed Cook under safety car, and then to be fair, they swapped positions back. But I did think that, and Harvey noted this on the commentary as well, that they raced a little bit after. It seemed they raced a little bit after. Not just those two, that little pack they were in.
Still racing hard coming up to Coppice where lights and boards had already been put out. And as you say, it comes up instantly on the lights in the car. Yeah.
I think that regardless of the fact they swap positions back, I think if that happens, they should be penalised regardless if they put positions back. Because I'm sick of, and it's not so much in this case, I'm sick of drivers ignoring flags.
Yeah.
And it's in all motorsports.
Yeah.
I cannot understand, and all the data's there, and it happens in F1 as well, that you can see when people aren't backing off for yellows and double yellows.
Yeah.
And as you say, in the old days of the boards, yeah, I give you a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. These days, it's on the dash, and if anyone's pushing and clearly not coming off after that, and it's not just picking on these, it happens most of the times in most motorsport, but I think that should be a slam dunk penalty of some description. Whether that's a fine for the team or a fine for them, I don't know. I don't want to see them losing positions or grid penalties for it, but I want to see something.
Or a penalty point.
Yeah, penalty point.
Stack them up through the season.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
When the safety car was out, rain was starting to fall a lot harder, and Chilton and House decided it was time to gamble. Chilton was having such a poor weekend in the lower echelons of the grid, it made sense.
Yeah.
We know that Chilton loves a bit of a tyre gamble.
To be fair, there were signs, certainly down at the first corner, of tyre marks reminiscent of what it was on that formation lap last year at Donington, where Chilton came in early.
Yeah. And
I can understand why he's made that call.
I'm surprised Moore didn't make the gamble, given on the way the race had gone. Yeah, and the fact there was a fairly cheap pit stop because of the safety car. Yeah. Obviously, it would turn out that it wasn't the right call. However, I was surprised how quick the shower passed and cleared. I was expecting, having been to Donington several times and knowing how hard and fast that rain can come down. As I say, they were able to get back out, but their gambles didn't work out. But I don't blame either driver for taking the gamble. I think it was absolutely worth taking.
At this point, by the way, Ingram was 5th.
Yep. And I must admit, when I watched this race, I turned to my girlfriend and said I thought Ingram was going to win the race because it was the cars were twitchy. It was clearly wet enough to twitch the cars.
Yeah.
And out of the front 5, Ingram in those conditions is the best.
Yeah.
I think him and Sutton are the best on the grid. Obviously, Sutton wasn't in this race to do it.
Yeah.
I did turn to myself, I think Ingram wins this. Unfortunately for him, the conditions didn't stay like that long enough, I don't think.
No, they didn't.
Aaron Taylor-Smith started to attack Camish after the safety car had gone in. Again, the Vox was very good in those conditions. And if I was Camish, I'd be very worried because Aaron Taylor-Smith has a checkered history, shall we say. I wouldn't want to race him in those kind of conditions, put it that way.
He's not afraid of making a move,
No, he's not.
Sometimes they come off, sometimes they don't. But yeah, it was definitely the wrong call for the two guys that went out on the wets, dried up fairly quickly, and it wasn't long till Ingram got past Dobble to be now into the top 3.
Who, to give Dobble his credit, fought very well, admirably, and was able
better than he did in race 1.
Absolutely. And then we saw the similar battle with Aaron Taylor-Smith and him passing to second with a very good late move as well. But it was ultimately Camish's race to win. However, I feel kind of sorry for Camish in a way because his first race is one of the season and nobody cares.
No.
Nobody cares. It's Tom Ingram. What I also thought was great, and I'm sure he wasn't the only driver, is that Moffat went to congratulate Ingram on that drive in the paddock afterwards, which was caught in the cameras. I don't think he'd be the only driver if he did, but obviously that's the only one the camera picks up. But that was great to see that the respect and the fact that the other drivers were able to sort of, at least Moffat was able to go, do you know what, that's incredible.
There was plenty of celebration and even teams going, wow, what a drive.
Yeah.
And there are very few drives that we've seen in touring cars like that. There's probably only one more that I can put my mind to, which I think is Matt Jackson at Snetterton in 2007-ish.
Okay, so I remember
where he went from like 16th, 17th or 18th to go on and win that race.
Your memory's not as good. So I remember Sutton winning a race at Snetterton where he started practically at the back of the grid in Infinity. And I also remember Ingram in the Avensis in the rain at Snetterton from the back of the grid to 3rd, I think it was. The cream rises to the top, as they say, and Ingram is one of the greatest champions we've had in the series. A really good drive, and it salvaged his chance of this championship. It's kept him right in there.
Meanwhile, though...
Okay, before I go to the final results, go on.
De Leon had made his way back up through the field. Now, we mentioned earlier on that he had to come into the pits, but he got into like another real battle pack in that midfield, and he was the one that came out on top. The top 8 had kind of gone off after that safety car, and he then came to the front of that second pack and finished 9th overall, with Robo actually slipping down to 13th.
Did you say as well that Bob Thompson was helping out this weekend?
Yes, so he was doing a little bit of driver coaching this weekend. Louise had a word with him on the grid, and it seems that he has plans and bits and pieces falling into place, like some of these puzzles do over the season, and he's actually in the best position at this point in the season that he's ever been before for having a drive for next year. Now, whether that means the right sponsors in the right places, or whether that means
The right offer from the right team.
the right contract on the table and he's just waiting for those few extra sponsors, we can only speculate about at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's looking positive to have Bobby back on the grid for next season.
And we'll obviously touch on that as and when it becomes relevant. Right,
Yep.
The final results then. Camish, his first win of the season. Ingram in second. Aaron Taylor-Smith on the overall podium. That's a great result for him. And
Yep.
look, he makes me smile, isn't he? He was brilliant. I think he's a great character.
Did it here last year as well, didn't
Yeah, I think he's a top guy, and he's only getting better with age, I have to say. And he seems really at home in that car this season as well, which is great. Cook in fourth, Hill fifth, Dobble sixth, good result for him. Turkington seventh, good recovery from him after the spin. Morgan in eighth, Darryl Dedean, as you've touched on there, in ninth. Osborne 10th for Eels all weekend. Zelos, another points finish in 11th. Watson in 12th. Rowbottom slipped back down to 13th. Sumpton managed to get on the point scoring sheet well in 14th. And Huff, who was not very good this weekend, sort of went backwards as the weekend went on. He finished in 15th. Now, I'll just do some of the penalties before we do where we are with the championship points. So in race one, Mikey Doble did receive an official reprimand and 2 penalty points for the collision he had with Tom Ingram. They've used the term collision. But yes.
Okay.
Race 2, Andrew Watson received a verbal warning for gaining an unfair advantage in the incident involving Darryl Leon. Don't know what that was, didn't see it on the cameras.
Nope.
Race number 3, now this is the interesting one. Andrew Watson received an official reprimand and 2 penalty points for causing the collision with Aidan Moffat. This counts as a strike, which carries a further 3-place grid penalty.
Yep, that's fair.
He's got there before Rowbottom. Rowbottom received an official reprimand and 2 penalty points during this round 24 for an incident involving Rob Hoff and Colin Turkington.
Yep.
And Dan Zelos wasn't able to stay out of the stewards' bus on his debut. He received an official reprimand and 2 penalty points during this round 24 for causing a collision in an incident involving Chris Smiley and Aidan Moffat.
I think he just wanted a full experience.
Yes.
And that includes going to the stewards' bus.
I hope that's not the last we've seen of Zelos. We'll touch on that in the next preview. Or maybe even in the off-season. We've got a bit of a gap now between now and Sil. So when in the interest of finishing this pod sometime this year, let's do the where we sit in the championships, because you've got that on your screen.
Yeah, so Jake Hill takes the lead of the championship by 9 points. He's on a total of 316 currently, from Tom Ingram on 307. A further 11 points back is Ashley Sutton, probably the only 3 drivers now in the championship hunt realistically. Mathematically, we can go all the way down to 6. So we've got Turkington in 4th, Camish in 5th, and Cook in 6th.
Are you finally writing people off, are you?
And you just want to make a good point that Aaron Taylor-Smith sits 7th in the championship.
Which I think, I'm not trying to be condescending here, I think that is miraculous, personally. I think that is, if he can finish in the effectively best of the rest, I think that is one of the result of the season. I really do. Enough. I also think that Turkington, who's had a pretty good weekend, goes to prove my point that he's not going to outscore the people ahead of him enough to get back in this championship fight.
Dan Zelos scored a total of 12 points this weekend.
Top of the cap.
Goes above Halstead in the championship. Is only 5 points behind Sumpton. We'll see whether he comes back.
But Sumpton got that many points?
Sumpton's got 17 points this season. But the way Zelos was speaking in like a little TikTok interview that he did, he was thanking the team for the opportunities that he's had this weekend. It doesn't sound particularly likely, but we'll see how things develop, because we'll things move fast in that state. Just
touch on the teams, manufacturers, and Jack Sears, would you, while we're here?
So Jack Sears double won this weekend, took 2 race victories. Osborne took the first one of the weekend, but he wins the Jack Sears for this weekend. Obviously a healthy points lead of 93 points. He can wrap it up next time out at Silverstone.
It's really bad, isn't it? If he if he wins that early. Not for him, but
No,
for
no.
the competitors in there.
In the Independence Trophy, Aaron Taylor-Smith is 59 points clear of Dobble.
Yeah.
Dobble is Smiley's third, 93 points back from that. Evans Howshall, Power Max Racing are 74 points clear of Restart Racing in the Independents. We have Napa, top of the Teams Championship by 104 points from Bristol Street Motors. And then in the manufacturers, it's nice and tight. Ford are 2 points clear of BMW, although Accelerator are a further 96 back on that.
Yeah, Chilton's not finished enough races.
No, he hasn't. Although between Hyundai and Toyota, there is only 6 points.
I think if Toyota can get that Scout, that's incredible.
Yeah, certainly.
Particularly as they've got 2 debut drivers for them this year, effectively.
Yeah.
Cool, right, shall we move on to our awards and then roll off the predictions very, 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 very quickly? There's not much to talk about there. Drive of the day for you?
I think just because of the consistency, it has to be Hill this weekend.
Same as mine. Same as me.
Although Ingram had that fantastic drive in race 3, obviously race 2 non-finished, really let it down. Otherwise, I think he would have probably been driver of the weekend.
I think Turkington's another person I would have considered when you considered took a second on qualifying, race win, second, and then good recovery in race 3, which have.
I mean, Turkington has actually outscored Hill this weekend, but
not enough. Not enough.
Yeah,
How many?
So Turkington has 49 points this weekend to Hill's 41,
and that's my point in a nutshell. That's my point in a nutshell to why I don't think he's in this race. Anyway, villain of the weekend, I've gone for Toyota. I honestly thought they'd, based on what we saw at the start of the season.
Yep.
I thought they'd do a lot better this weekend, and actually, we've seen some very poor racing from some of them. We've seen Moffat, who might as well not bother getting off the truck. Huff really couldn't get the car working this weekend for whatever reason, and Cook
stuck it on pole, and that's about it.
But then I thought he struggled really in race pace. And Cook's done what Cook does, which is get 3 top 6 finishes, because that's what Cook does. But yeah.
For me, it has to be a little more specific. It has to be Watson.
Yeah, I can understand it.
We obviously don't know what's caused the incident in race 1, but his weekend has been marred with incidents throughout and poor speed at times as well.
Yeah.
I think improvements really need to come in these last 2 rounds of the season.
I have to say, I'm slightly worried for him for next year. Because if Toyota are making a real fist of this in terms of becoming a serious manufacturer, and you've got such a disparity between your teammates. And okay, look.
I'll tell you what, mate. Who was your surprise good of the weekend?
Yeah, we'll
move on.
I'll go PMR, that they smashed qualifying. Yeah. They've got themselves on the outright podium.
Yeah.
They've got... Each driver scored points in every race, I think. Yeah, I think they are... It's hard to sound like I'm not being condescending, but I think they are working real miracles in that team. You consider what they have budget-wise and resource-wise compared to some of the other people they're up against. I think they're doing... Of course, they had the big boost in the engine, which is apparently giving them 1,000 horsepower compared to everybody else. But what they're actually doing is really good, I think.
For me, Zelos has outperformed where I thought he would be this weekend.
Yeah,
I thought he might sneak a 15th. He might just sneak into the points, but to score points in all 3 races, stay relatively out of trouble, apart from that trip to the steward's bus, and be on the pace with the drivers that have been in the championship for this long, full credit to him. Because I think he's shown exactly what he's got that he can offer to this championship.
Absolutely. Surprise bad, I have gone for Chilton. Just not... Chilton has this thing this season, I'm not sure it's entirely his fault, but good race, bad. Good, bad, good, bad. And this was on the bad end of the scale.
He's scored less points than Moffat this weekend.
And Moffat had 2 non-finishes?
Yep. Yeah. It doesn't look particularly good for him. I can't really see past him, especially as we know he normally goes well at Donington.
Yeah, are you going for Chilton as well, mate?
I will, yes.
Fair enough. Right. Okie dokie, we'll rattle through the predictions.
Into the best bit now.
For you it is, for me not so much. Well, we both got pole wrong. I went for Morgan, you went for Turkington, so that
was so close.
You were so close, but...
So close.
Never mind. Race wins, I went for Ingram, Hill and Rowbottom. Thank you, Stones of Donington. That's helped me out massively. You went for Turkington, Hill and Ingram, so a point to you for the Turkington. Well done. We both got a point for Dobble in the Jack Sears. This week you've really made your mark this weekend, so I'll just run through mine quickly because it's not as exciting as your celebrations and your smug face. I had all 4 of the top 4 to miss out the fast 6. 2 failed, 2 didn't. 3+ drivers not to score points. Until race 3, that was looking possible.
It was, yeah. De Leon and Sumpton got their points for the weekend in race 3.
Obviously, House said the only driver not to score.
Yep.
Both Toyota teams to get a podium.
Not quite.
Not at all.
No.
Nowhere near.
No.
And then we'll come back to the fantasy one at the end. Your 3 that were correct. Pearson replacement scores points. Yeah, he did. Championship leader to change, going to Silverstone. It has.
Yeah, he did.
Jake Hill. Moffat out in Q1 again. Yeah, he was.
It's a little bit predictable from him now, isn't it? Yeah. He should have the pace in that car to get through, but he just doesn't seem to be able to do it on 1 lap pace.
Then we did a bit of fantasy touring cars this weekend. We picked 3 drivers. We picked 1 from the top 6. We picked the quote midfield driver, and we picked a Jack Sears contender. We added all our points up over the weekend. I went for Ingram, Rowbottom, and Dobble. At points, I was unlucky with it.
You were unlucky with Ingram.
Yeah, well, Rowbottom.
Yeah, the fact that Ingram had a non-finish, a blank on these scores really makes a big difference.
When you're doing this sort of thing, absolutely it does, yeah. And the fact that he blanked from second, possibly first.
Yeah.
And in race 1, he might have got a podium had Dobble not happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been shafted this weekend, and that has to be said.
Yeah, so you scored 62 points from those.
Yeah, whereas you went for Turkington, Aaron Taylor-Smith.
Yeah.
And Dobble.
And I think I scored 97 points from those. Fairly convincing. I think Taylor-Smith had the measure of Rowbottom pretty much all weekend. Rowbottom showed good pace at times. But yeah, it was a clean sweep on the generals for me.
Yeah, which means that you've scored... How many did I say you scored? So it's 6, was it? You've scored 6 points this weekend. I scored 1, which puts you, I believe, it's 7 clear with 2 races to go.
It's a big gap now.
It's
a big gap with 2 to go.
It is. I don't think it's insurmountable.
Okay.
I will be fine.
Pointsy. That's what you need to be. You need to be pointsy.
Prediction: a Hyundai to come to the grid on that.
No, we've already discussed this going forward.
It's the spirit of the game. Yeah, absolutely.
It's got to be the same as we've done for the rest of the season.
Absolutely.
You still reckon you've got a little bit of a favour to call in?
I have got a favour to call in.
We'll see how that progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you got any final thoughts as we finish the Donington review?
Well, we've got a little bit of a break now between Donington and Silverstone, the final 2 rounds being Silverstone and Brands. We're going to do a tyre update for you. 10 minutes with tyre update.
Are we?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Because we said we would.
Okay.
Obviously, we only had the medium tyre this weekend. It didn't make for huge differences in the races in race 2. It's something that we're going to discuss, how tyres are used across the season.
See, I thought this weekend worked better because of it. I thought the hybrid made enough of a difference that you saw passes.
Okay.
And you saw clear hybrid passes.
Yeah.
Without having two classes of softs and hards, for want of a better. I know mediums, but
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. My final thoughts are that I think I know where the championship's going.
Okay.
It's not who I wrote down at the start of the season, which is depressing for me when we come to do our...
Quite honestly, I can't remember.
No. As long as you remember where you put them.
Yeah, they're still in the car.
Okay, let's hope that nothing happens to the car.
Yeah.
I think I know where the championship's going. I think that it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to go right down to the wire. Silverstone has been kind to 2 of the 3 drivers at the front.
It's always seemed to be very kind to Ingram. He always seems to go really well at Silverstone. So
I think there's no slouch there.
No, I think it could tighten up that championship battle going into the final weekend.
Yeah.
But as you say, Sutton needs to have the best weekend of those 3 next time out.
Yeah. Thankfully for him, Hill, you would say, has had the most checkered out of the 3 at Silverstone. Again, not always his fault, but he has had, the checkered out of those 3.
And weather can still play a part.
We are in rainy season when we go there. September.
Yep.
September showers.
We'll see.
We shall see. I think that it's going to be exciting into the season.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts and feelings on how you see the season coming to a close. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on a 10 minutes with as well, because we've got a couple of free spaces that we can fill leading up to the Silverstone weekend.
Yeah, if you don't want to hear a 10 minutes with, suggest top 5 instead. We launched those in the summer break, and we've got a couple of other categories that we can do. We've got them recorded. We haven't put out yet.
Possibly. Between now and then, do like, subscribe, get the bell on. Make sure you share it with all your touring car friends and family.
Or just friends and family.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Get them into the sport.
Numbers are numbers. I don't care if you're a fan or not. Numbers are numbers in this game.
But yeah, we love hearing your comments and stuff on social media, whether it's stuff that we commented on or our own posts. We love to be interacting with you on there.
Yeah, and don't feel you have to agree with us. We've had quite a few this weekend where people haven't agreed with us, and that's absolutely fine. As long as we keep it respectful.
It's all there for debate.
Absolutely.
But until then, we'll be back with a 10 minutes with or a top 5 very soon, and we will see you again.
To quote the great man himself, stay safe.
Here it comes.